Alrighty. Well, you guys sang so good tonight. So well done to you. Well done to you. I'm proud of you guys. I was back there and I'm just like, do I run slides or do I watch my kids act like grown-ups in the spiritual realm? This is amazing. So, whew. And then I had my own workout putting this up here. So we're beginning a series called Under the Microscope. Under the Microscope. And the whole goal is to get a closer look at science and faith. A closer look at science and faith, because that's kind of the idea of what a microscope does, right? It gives you a little bit of a closer look at something. When you put it right under here, you get a little bit of a detailed look of maybe some things you didn't know about it before. You get to see some more of the details under the microscope, and we're going to look at this concept of science and faith, which I don't know about you, but have you ever thought, man, scientists, and faith, like theologians and pastors and missionaries, they're kind of trying to do the same thing? You ever thought about that before? That you got this whole study called science, observing the natural world and discovering what's actually out there. And then you got these pastors and theologians and missionaries and Christians and people who just read their Bible and everyday people who follow Jesus. And this is giving us a lens to see what's actually out there and what God has actually made in this world. And so I think a lot of times we approach this concept of like science and faith like they're two ingredients that don't really go together much. Like they're two ingredients that you wouldn't really think about. Like, let me just ask you this. Does anyone know what this is right here? It's just this white powder, maybe baking soda. Does anyone know the difference between baking soda and baking powder, by the way? I don't. Sulfuric acid. You'd probably be able to smell it by now. There's no odor. Kind of looks like fake snow. Either way, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this little... Jeremiah, could you help me out with this? Can you hold the funnel? Actually, you know what? Hold this. Do the fun part for sure. And you're just going to dump it into the funnel. Yep. We'll make sure it... all of it in. It actually kind of looks like that Fun Dip candy. I guess we're going to find out. Get it? Yeah, all of it. There we go. It's coming. Now, I promise, this is edible because you guys eat this every time you have chocolate chip cookies. But we're not making chocolate chip cookies. Jeremiah, I'm going to need you to help me out here. Can you hold this while it keeps going in? Just shake it a little bit and get it in there. Now, I got another question for you guys. Can you tell what this obviously is? Water, right? Oh, vinegar. It could be tequila, it could be water, it could be vinegar, it could be... That's vinegar. Woo! No, you cannot. Yeah, I'm sure you do. So we got these two ingredients that don't seem like they normally go together. And if you know anything... Good job. Round of applause for Jeremiah. There we go. Now I need another volunteer. That was awesome. Helena, I actually saw your hand first. So you walk up on stage here. And you ready to do this? Okay, here we go. Countdown for Helena on 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Keep going. Yeah, get it all. Round of applause. There you go. That was the fun part. So you got these, well, I mean, it kind of did. It just exploded very, yeah. You got these two ingredients, right? You got baking soda and vinegar. And I'm just curious what the first person, whoever discovered the combination of those two was like, right? What was the scenario where baking soda and vinegar first met? You know, and sparks flied, and there was love at first sight, and it was super exciting until, we're talking about ingredients. We're not talking about a love story. But you look at baking soda and vinegar, and you're like, I wouldn't normally use vinegar in the same spot where I would use baking soda. And they don't seem like they go together all the time. And here's the case that I'm trying to make, is that sometimes when we put two ingredients together that don't seem like they go together, they begin to reveal something to us that's actually quite exciting that we didn't expect. And faith and science actually can begin to point us to something entirely different, which is going to open up our minds to a whole new reality. And so I think sometimes when we look at this, I'm like, wow, this is really exciting. You might be on the other end of the spectrum. You're like, who cares? I already know that, or I don't really care that much. Here's why the separation of science and faith may not matter a whole lot to you right now, but there's going to be come a point in your life where people are beginning to go, you know what? You got scientists who are trying to rationally prove that God doesn't exist or that the Bible is a bunch of fairy tales. And, like, follow the science. And the truth of the matter is science actually reveals what is. Okay, science is not trying to make a point. Science is just trying to help you observe something and discover stuff. Well, if God actually created this stuff, then it would bear reason to see, man, science might actually begin to reveal something about the person who made this, okay? And so one of the cool things about science is, in fact, is not quite opposed to faith. It actually can reveal the things that your faith also reveals, which is a good God who created everything, and we get to discover a little bit about this. Now, you don't actually have to choose a side then. You don't have to choose, oh, I'm team faith, I'm only faith, and I'm okay with being called dumb and stupid because I don't believe in science. I believe in the Bible, right? That's not something that you need to choose. You don't be like, oh, I'm team science, and so I guess I'm going to have to get rid of my faith because, it's kind of stupid. It doesn't make sense. Like, science and the Bible actually work together. In fact, this is the case that has been made for Christians for thousands of years. In fact, do you know that some of the biggest scientific breakthroughs and some of the most famous scientists of all time were Christians? I'm not going to Einstein, but I would, yes. Here's a few examples. Here's just to give me a few examples. That was not one I was thinking of, but probably a good example. Okay? There's a guy named Copernicus. You guys ever heard of Copernicus? All right? I used to say Copernicus. I don't know why. It's just a fun way to say it. Copernicus. And he studied the planets and the stars in a time when everybody thought that the entire solar system revolved around the world. And he's like, no, it actually revolves around the sun. And he gave us our first picture, probably the closest accurate picture we had at the time of what the solar system was actually like. And he was a Christian. In the 1500s, there was a guy named Galileo. Made loads of cool discoveries about science. In fact, he knew so much about science that people started calling him the father of science, which is a pretty big title. And guess what? The father of science was a Christian. Later on, there's a guy named Newton, Isaac Newton. He wrote a few laws. I'm just kidding. He discovered these laws, right? He was considered to be one of the greatest scientists ever. And you want to know something else? He was a theologian. He wrote a lot about God. He was a very strong Christian. Another guy named William Kelvin. Have you guys ever heard of William Kelvin? Okay, William Kelvin studied the interaction between molecules and how the friction there created heat. And he's the one who discovered what is the point at which it is the coldest it can possibly be. Right? The coldest something that could possibly be is when the molecules are moving absolutely not at all. Even something that's ice. Even in ice, all the molecules inside the ice cube are still moving, just really, really slow. And Calvin was like, well, let me try to figure out what's the point at which they stop moving completely. And you know what they call that? They call it 0 Kelvin. It's literally named after a Christian guy who is a scientist. Okay? These are all names maybe you've heard before in your textbook, but there's actually more Christians working in science and making incredible advancements in their field even today. So here's a guy. His name is Robert Selvendren. And he's a scientist who focuses on plant research, and he works as a church leader and a theologian also. Catherine, I'm going to say, I think her name is Hayho, okay? You can see this for yourself right here. Catherine Hayho. It's coming. It's not up there. I don't have it up there. Oh, man. That's a fun name to spell. I'm sorry. Anyways, she's a professor and a scientist studying climate change, and she's a Christian. Obviously, you have Mary Kenneth Keller, who's a pioneer in the field of computer science. Fun fact, she's a nun. Imagine that. Like, you got this nun, and she's, like, better at hacking than a lot of hackers because she's just so good at computer science, right? All right, and so she follows Jesus. You got Amolu Fagunwa is a microbiologist and a Christian faith scholar. He's actually doing some amazing work in the world right now in the studies of science, how science informs faith in God. Katherine Johnson, space scientist, physicist, mathematician, literal genius, right? Directly impacted the first manned space flight. Also a follower of Jesus. I mean, amazing Christians, amazing scientists. And this is the cool thing. We could add tons of names to this list who have made advancements in the fields of medicine and psychology and chemistry and more. People who had a strong, active faith in God. And one of the things that drove them to the field of science that they were studying, you know what it is? Kind of, yeah. It's this process of going, like, what is it that God has made? And you know what they discovered? The more that they learned about their field of science, the more amazed they became at God as the Creator. Right? This is an amazing thing when you begin to understand all the cool and intricate and amazing things that God has done. Remember the science experiment we did a little bit earlier? We saw that two totally different ingredients came together to create this cool chemical reaction. But what if I told you that it's not only after baking soda and vinegar come together that we truly understand more about the ingredient, right? It's not till after these two come together, then all of a sudden something totally new is revealed about baking soda. Is that it's actually highly reactive to acidic substances. We learned something about vinegar, that when it invades a field of some sort of base, which would be baking soda, right? All of a sudden it triggers some sort of chemical reaction. It's called a catalyst. And we discovered that not only on its own properties, but when it interacts with other things, we discover even more about it. And the cool thing about faith and science is as we begin to integrate both, our belief in following Jesus and our pursuit of discovering truth in the world and what actually is out there, both of them begin to work together to reveal to us something amazing about God. I'll answer your question afterwards, okay, bud? When we see these awesome interactions working together, they're actually creating something that wasn't there before. And I really think you're going to begin to understand more about God, have a greater understanding that wasn't there before when you begin to see faith and science working together. Now, here's what frames my thinking with that. If you have your Bible, turn with me to the very first page, Genesis chapter 1. Okay? Genesis chapter 1. Oh, good job. Now, without even looking, can somebody quote to me Genesis 1:1? I saw your hand, Ryan. That's pretty close, yeah. Round of applause for Ryan. There we go. Good job, right? This is incredible, the Bible is incredible revelation of God's interaction with humankind. And when we get to the book of Genesis, it's kind of like setting the scene for how does God start interacting with humans. It's like the opening of the scene of a movie, right, that lays the foundation for the rest of the story. And the very first words are this: in the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. Now, why is that so important? Well, because the very first thing that the Bible tells us is that God was there. He's always been there. He was there before anything else was there. Before anything existed, there was God. And so the very first thing that we know to be true about the universe is this: God was there when it started. God saw it all came into existence. But beyond that, look at what God did. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth, it was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. And so God says, "Let there be light." And there was light, and God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. So God called the light day, and he called the darkness night. And then evening passed, and morning came, and that was the first day. Then God said, let there be a space between the waters to separate the waters of the heavens from the waters of the earth. And there is what happened. God made this space to separate the waters of the earth from the waters of the heaven, and God called the space above sky. And the evening passed and the morning came, and that was the second day. Then God said, let the waters beneath the sky flow together in one place so that the dry ground may appear. And that's what happened. God called the dry ground land and the water seas. And God saw that it was good. And so he said, let the land sprout with vegetation, every sort of seed-bearing plant and trees that grow seed-bearing fruit. These seeds will produce the kinds of plants and trees from which they came. And that was what happened. The land produced vegetation, all sort of seed-bearing plants and seed-bearing fruit. And their seeds produced plants and trees of the same kind, and God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning passed, and it was the third day. And God was not done yet, right? Can you imagine just having a third-person perspective of all this happening? God just like, and then this, right? And then this, and then the water's just like whoosh. And like literally watching an entire globe of water just go, and all of a sudden like it separates and land starts appearing, and all of a sudden like trees and forest. Can you imagine being just hovering above Brazil as God was creating the Amazon? Just like trees everywhere. Bam, bam, bam. Like, and the trees just keep going. And God is speaking and things are just happening left and right. This is amazing. Verse 14, and then God said, let lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them be signs to mark the seasons, days, and years. Let these lights in the sky shine down on the earth, and that's what happens. And God made two great lights, the larger one to govern the day, and the smaller one to govern the night, and he also made the stars. And God set these lights in the sky to light the earth, to govern the day and the night, to separate the light from the darkness, and God saw that it was good. And the evening passed and the morning came. It was the fourth day. Now, that would have been an exciting day, right? Watching stars just exist. Just like... And by the way, this is like in passing. It's like, oh, and he also made the stars. It's the stars. Are you kidding me? Do you know how many stars there are? And this was just like a passing, oh, and by the way, let me do this while I have some time, right? It's like almost like God was bored and was like, okay, let's make some more. Billions. Yeah. And then God said, let the waters swarm with fish and other life. Let the skies be filled with birds of every kind. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that scurries and swarms in the water and every sort of bird producing offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. And let the fish fill the seas and let the birds multiply on the earth. And the evening passed and the morning came and marked the fifth day. And then God said, you know what? Why does the sea get all the action? Let's put something on the land too, right? Let the earth produce every sort of animal. He made all the animals. I'm just going to skip through that. Verse 26, verse 25, God made all the sorts of wild animals, and he saw that it was good. Saw that it was good. Now, I'm blown away by that. It is amazing. Everything we see and experience in creation today was made by God a really long time ago. And so every scientific pursuit, every time we look at something under the microscope, you know what we're doing? We are observing a product of God doing something good. You want to put a leaf under here? That is a good design of God. You want to put a worm under here? That is a good design of God. You want to start to study how people work and the psychology of that? Good design of God. God made the brain to function not only in response to stimuli, but also for your mind to think. That is a good design of God. Science helps us discover more of what God is like. In fact, if you want to know what an artist is like, study their artwork, right? If you want to know a singer, what their temperament is like, okay? Read their lyrics. So you might get a sense of like what Taylor Swift's dating life is like if you ever listen to any of her songs. You know what I'm talking about? You're like, maybe I shouldn't date this girl because she's going to write a song about me and everyone's going to hate me for the rest of the time, right? And so I begin to think about like, man, if I start to study the work of an artist, I learn more about the artist. And all of a sudden, the more I begin to study the handiwork of God, I begin to understand more about God. So science and faith work together. You could say it this way. Creation points to a creator. Let me ask you this. Let's say this is a very expensive piece of machinery, right? You guys know this as a phone, right? Now, if I just took all the parts, not even the parts, the ingredients that made the parts, the tungsten, the aluminum, the titanium, the glass, the plastic, the rubber, all the things that make up I just took all the ingredients and I just tossed them in the air and they landed on the ground. Do you think they would form this? Okay, so how many times would I have to do that? Just toss it in the air and hope that it would actually land like this? Why? So the fact that something so complex and unique and amazing exists automatically indicates somebody put it together like this. And you're telling me you're going to look at the world that is filled with even more complexity and amazement, and you're just like, yeah, it's possible at some point all of it just randomly happened. Creation points to a creator. The fact that you see something made means somebody made it. So when we dive into science and start learning about the world around us, we don't have to be afraid of what it means to our faith. You can be a scientist and passionately believe in God. Because we can be excited the more that we learn about the world, actually the more that we're going to learn about God. So, what do we do with this? I want to wrap this up really quick. If it's true that creation points to a creator, here are 3 things I want to challenge you to do. Number 1, be courageous and comfortable to ask hard questions. You know where the biggest breakthroughs come? When you ask the biggest, toughest question. Like, how does that work? You know what? I don't think that works. Let me prove it. Let me test it. And you can ask very hard questions about God. He's not scared of them. If you've been given a Christianity, a version of faith that doesn't make sense to you, ask hard questions. Ask questions until it does make sense. God's not smaller than that. He's big enough to handle your hard questions. Got a question about science? Maybe exploring those things will help you learn new things about the God who made the things you're studying. Got a question about faith? Awesome. Maybe by learning about how the world was made, you're going to discover more about the God who made it. So number 1, be comfortable asking tough questions. Number 2, learn about both God and science. Okay? For example, you might have known this. The earth is exactly how many miles from the sun? 93 million. Okay, we got a brilliant person in our midst. All righty? 93 million miles. Now, if the world was 93 million and 1 miles from the sun, what would happen to everything on the planet? We would be absolutely frozen. What if we were 93 million minus 1, because I can't do that math, miles from the sun? We'd be burning up. Everything would be worse than the Sahara Desert on the planet. We would not be able to survive. And yet somehow, for thousands of years, we've hung in this exactly perfect, delicate balance that the gravitational field of the sun is not pulling us closer, it's not pushing us farther away, but we're actually the precise distance. How in the world would that be possible other than a God, right? Here's another thing. Do you know the distance of vision of a newborn baby? It is 23 inches, which is this distance away. It's almost like God knew the only thing that this baby needs when it's born is to see its mom. And you begin to learn when you study science and how the world works and how humans work and how God made everything, you learn a lot more about God. Not only is he huge and amazing and brilliant, he's also caring and kind and sees you. So, learn about both God and science. And number 3, so ask tough questions, learn about both. Number 3, talk to older, wiser adults. Guys, I promise you the questions you're asking are some questions that somebody else has asked before. Okay, if you're wondering about God, if you're wondering about science, somebody else has asked that question before. They can help you wrestle through some of your questions and understand more about creation and its creator. Maybe it's your parents. Maybe it's me, the youth pastor. Maybe it's your life group leader. Maybe it's somebody else, a caring adult in your life, a Christian that you know, a teacher that you know is a Christian. And so maybe you can ask them some questions that you've been wrestling with. And I promise you this, we're not going to know all the answers, but we actually can maybe help you come alongside of you and process through that questioning together, all right? It's okay to have questions because creation points to a creator, and because of that, we shouldn't be afraid to ask questions or dive in knowing more about science and faith. In fact, one question I would love for you to ask yourself this week, to think about this week, is this: where do I see God today? Where did I see God today? As you look back at your day, maybe you might, even during your life group, you might go outside and you go like, hey man, where do I see God in this? What does this reveal to me about God? I want to encourage you to ask that question, where do I see God today? Because it's amazing that he shows up in so many more places than you realize. He's actually very involved in your life. Where did I see God today? And so again, as you're going to your life group, here's a question, maybe even more specifically for tonight, is what's one thing in creation that reminds you of the Creator? If creation points to a creator, what is one thing in creation that reminds you of the Creator? I want to give you that question to start talking about in your life groups. I'm going to pray, and then I'll dismiss. Jesus, thank you so much for not only creating things so wonderfully, but giving us the opportunity to discover it more and more and more, and actually learn about you in the process. I pray that you would draw near to us as we are discovering what you've made. Amen.